devi fare altro che fare così. Cioè, italiano.
Anche questi sempre accesi.
Ah, ok.
Ve li scambiate così?
Sì, sì, sì.
È la fine degli anni 70. Tra alcuni amici che condividono l'esperienza cristiana, nasce il desiderio di incontrare, conoscere e portare a Rimini tutto quello che di bello e buono c'è nella cultura del tempo.
Volontari sono più di 3.000 durante la settimana dei Nidi, sono stati circa 700 durante queste settimane di allestimento, vengono da tutto il mondo.
Cosenza,
Milano,
Genova,
Benevento,
Taiwan,
Sicilia, Pakistan.
E così nel 1980 si svolge la prima edizione del Meeting per l'amicizia fra i popoli. Un incontro tra persone di fede e culture diverse, un luogo dove costruire la pace, la convivenza e l'amicizia fra i popoli, con il desiderio di conoscere e raccontare il mondo. Una trama di incontri tra persone con in comune la tensione al vero, al bene.
che ci stanno le stecche sotto.
Qua si allarga loro. Si allargano loro una volta che salgono. No, è solo più bassa.
Good morning. My name is Joseph Weiler, and I will act as a moderator today. I apologize for my Italian, which is a bit dodgy. However, I prefer not to be translated. Giussani always talked about the educational challenge. The challenge that we are facing today is a very specific one. What I mean to say is that the university, as associated to the religious identity, means to ask the universities, which are becoming increasingly secularized, to maintain this religious identity together with science and the relationship with the social and cultural life of the country, of the nation, of the world. This is for sure quite a daunting challenge, not a simple thing at all, and there is no single answer to this question. Much depends on the national cultural context where the universities are located. Today, we have 3 speakers. Well, we couldn't have hoped for more to discuss and deal with this topic. And I'm pleased to introduce you to Professor John Garvey, President of the Catholic University of America. Then Professor Moshe Kaveh, President of the Bar-Ilan University in Israel, the one with a strong Jewish identity in the country. And last but not least, Lorenzo Ornaghi, the Dean of the Università Cattolica of the Sacro, Cuore of the Holy Heart in Milan. We also decided to change the format of this event. I hope it works. Instead of giving 20 minutes to each of our speakers to make a presentation, we preferred to start a conversation and to answer a number of questions, which will enable us to keep an open discussion with an open end. I would like to ask the first question to Professor Garvey. Adesso passo all'inglese.
So, President Garvey, in a few minutes, I would first kindly ask you just to tell us a little bit about what does it mean when we say the Catholic University of America, and then more specifically imagine a student who has to decide between 2 universities in Washington, D.C. Let's say George Mason and the Catholic University of America. And let's imagine that that student is a practicing Catholic. how would you try and persuade him, if you would, that he should choose the Catholic University of America as his choice for university education?
In just a few words, the big difference between the Catholic University of America and George Mason University is that the Catholic University of America is thoroughly Catholic, whereas George Mason, in accordance with the United States Constitution, is secular. By thoroughly Catholic, I mean two things. One, our academic pursuits in history and literature, art and music, law and economics, science and engineering are influenced by the Catholic intellectual tradition. And two, we want our students to grow in both wisdom and virtue. So we devote both people and programs to the moral and spiritual development of our undergraduate and graduate students.
But tell me, President Garvey, if it's thoroughly Catholic, so imagine that a student who's not a practicing Catholic, maybe he's an atheist, maybe a practicing Protestant, maybe a practicing Jew, like myself. Would he or she feel uncomfortable at the Catholic University of America? Would there be a reason for such a student to choose to go there?
I don't think that either non-believing or other believing students would feel uncomfortable in the sense that they were obliged to do things that that they found difficult. I do think that the appeal that the university holds for students might vary with how religious the students were within their own tradition. For example, according to there's an American institute, the Higher Education Research Institute, which keeps data on these things. Catholic students, rather Catholic colleges and universities in the United States have a higher proportion of Muslim students than public universities. To give an example close to home, at the Catholic University of America, the number of Muslim students in the last few years has more than doubled, from 40 to nearly 100. And I think that the reason is that students who observe dietary restrictions and dress codes and who pray during the day feel less out of place at a school where a large number of students will attend daily mass and where student religious ministers live in the residence halls. And they may also feel more comfortable with things like the single-sex residence halls that we have at the Catholic University. As for their own studies, I think that whether they the appeal that the Catholic intellectual tradition and the other courses that we offer hold for them.
One last brief question, President Garvey. In this first round, what would you say would be the percentage of Catholic students at your university, and what would be the percentage of Catholic professors?
In the undergraduate school, I think that the percentage of Catholic students is probably about 85%. In the graduate schools, which make up about half of the student population, the Catholic population is probably about 60%. As for the professors, the number of Catholics on the tenure track professors are somewhere between 55 and 60%.
Thank you, President Garvey, and I now turn to President Kaveh. And maybe I can start with exactly the same question. First of all, please tell the audience, how does Bar-Ilan University differ from the other universities in Israel? And then maybe you could also answer the same question. A religious student, a Jewish religious student, having to choose to go to Bar-Ilan or Tel Aviv University, why should he or she prefer to go to Bar-Ilan?
Thank you, Professor Weiler. I'm very pleased to be here. Bar-Ilan University was established 56 years ago. On one side, it's very good to be young and not to repeat mistakes of old universities. On the other side, we were born into a new era of society. The logo of the university is the Bible on one side and the microscope on the other side. And we would like to show to every student that you may get an insight and depth by studying the sources of wisdom which lies over 1,000 years, and combining it with modern science without giving up on excellence in all the fields of science. The distribution of students after 56 years, in my term I am 15 years president. I was the student of physics yesterday, the president today. Is the understanding of changing generations, approaches of different students in different time zones. The university on a mandatory basis, which makes it different from all the other 6 research universities, is every student, in addition to 47 different departments that he chooses to learn as a profession or as a research career, we developed over 56 years the largest Jewish philosophical religious reservoir of courses we have 2,000 courses that every student can reach. And to answer the question is, a secular student can choose to confront his identity, his developing identity, with the wisdom developed in his tradition, whether he's Jewish, whether he's not Jewish. And I must say, the students enjoy the studies of the 25% of curriculum. According to Israeli law, we cannot ask a student if you are religious or not and to accept him according to that. Nevertheless, we have studies, the schools they finished. So about 60% of the students finished secular high schools, and about 40% religious schools. And for the first time, they meet together in the courses. They are undergoing dialogues, and they learn that the most important item in life, which the university actually tries to teach, is the dignity to the others, although his opinion is very different from mine. We believe in the university that tolerance will create a better society. We would like that the wisdom the student is learning in the university, in his profession, will be used to help other people, not only to enrich himself. And we are very pleased that our graduates are fulfilling all the streams of life. We had a prime minister that was our graduate. We have ministers, we have judges, we have economists, businessmen. But they combine the ethics that is the basis of their experience in the university into life. We have 2 colleges in the university. Every college about 3,000-4,000 students. That 50% are non-Jewish and 50% Jewish. And the non-Jewish are learning 25% from their tradition. And they have joint courses to learn what are the similarities between the 3 monotheistic religions and how to use them to help any human being that in the religion was born in the image of God, and we have to help him.
To clarify one small point. So So every student enrolling in the university, there's a required curriculum of about 25% of his studies
Exactly.
that have to be of a Jewish content.
It's of a Jewish content if he's Jewish. If he's not Jewish, he can use 25% from courses which are according connected to his religion. Of course, some of them are mixing courses from both sides. So as you said, the difference between my university, you cannot finish a degree without being enriched in 25% in academic way. I will just say, these courses are on academic level. In our university, the saying is, don't preach, teach.
Bello, non predicare, solo insegnare. Rettore Ornaghi, torniamo a casa. Allora immaginiamo un studente a Milano.
Let's imagine a student in Milan who has to choose between La Statale, the state university, and the Catholic university. Let's imagine that he or she is practicing Catholic, who attends Mass, and why should he or she choose the Catholic, La Cattolica, and not the state university? Well, this is small compared to the rest of the Italian case, is small compared to the rest of the world. Professor Weiler allows me to do so. I would like to make an introduction before answering your question. Professor Weiler, before we got in, said, what is the meaning of this meeting, and can it be useful for the young people attending this meeting? And I was thinking about it, about a possible answer. Well, I think this meeting is very useful because it is not formal. It is not formal or ritual because for the first time ever, I think, it is based on the following question. What does it mean today to be a Catholic university or a Jewish university, or however, a university which is based on religion? This is the starting point, and this is my brief introduction, and then I'll answer a question. This is the starting point because down the centuries, we have lost the habit of asking ourselves what the religious basis of our universities is. And I think that the Catholic University of America in this respect is thoroughly Catholic. And what does it mean? In the historical experience or the historical analysis I was making in my head, well, I was thinking that at a time when a university is founded as Catholic or Jewish is a difficult and also an easy time at the same time. It's easy because when Cardinal Newman in Dublin founded the university, it was easy enough, but also for Father Gemelli to found a Catholic university. It was easy to establish them because they were in a hostile environment. Therefore, setting up a fully Catholic university was relatively easier, and I underline this word, relatively. Nevertheless, today, when it is difficult to understand all the hostilities in the outside world against Catholicism, this task is much more complex than the establishment of the university. Because what is at stake is a significant paradox of Catholic universities today and all universities that are based on religion. And this paradox is that as this university are rooted in a religious sense, meaning they have to, they don't follow the mainstream. The world is not hostile or does not seem to be hostile, but tends to empty out the religious meaning, the religious sense. Universities, Catholic or religion-based universities, therefore cannot follow the mainstream today. But this is fundamental to fully perform the role as university. Universities, whether Catholic or not, even those which are the trendiest, the most successful are those that are the closest to the origin of university: research, reflection and innovation. And training was based on research or associated to research. And I'm also at the end of this introduction. Therefore, being completely Catholic is not so easy. We have to be very honest. We have to know that, well, we cannot say that the Catholic University of the Holy Heart in Milan maybe is not fully Catholic. I'm not referring to any kind of orthodoxy, but to something else. That is, whether a university has a large or a small number of students. What does a successful university need today? Have a large number of students, like the one I represent, thus representing the microcosm of society, or a small university which has a very small number of students. Why should a young student choose what university to enroll at? Why should he choose the Cattolica of Milan? And maybe with a bit of idealism, I would like to tell him or her that our university, as a result of that paradox, that is, it doesn't follow the mainstream to perform its real function, is a university, therefore, that asks itself, will the graduates be able to find employment, and are we not just instructing them, but also educating them beyond professional skills? And also, I would explain them that a university is also a community. A student can come to our students, visit it for a number of days. It is community, not only involving those who are there at the moment, but also former students and future students. That is, the shape of that community also depends on that. And I would like to underline, even though we all have limits, but I would like to underline that it is necessary to experiment on our university. And our slogan today is a genuine experience.
I would like to ask a question to Professor Garvey and to Professor Ornaghi specifically. You heard what Professor Kaveh said. And it seems that their approach is quite ambitious and challenging because they ask to their students to study at least 25% in relation to specific subjects. So 25% of their courses should cover subjects relating to Jewish civilization. Is there anything similar in your universities? And what do you think about this approach of the Bar-Ilan University? Is it clear?
So,
No, tell him it's
I
clear.
was saying that it seems
He doesn't need to repeat it.
that maybe Bar-Ilan is the most audacious, because it says, non è necessario ripeto la domanda in inglese, quello che ho già fatto. So it seems the most audacious because Professor Kaveh said every student who comes to study with us, whether he's doing physics or humanities or social sciences, a full 25% of his curriculum has to be from a basket which is Jewish subjects, Jewish material. What do you think of that model? Is it something that could work, should work in other religious universities? It seems to go, if I understood correctly, beyond what you ask of your students.
Would you like me to go first? I would have to see more about the details of the courses in Jewish culture and religion. But let me make this observation. There is a tendency in thinking about university education to divide the world up into religious activities and secular activities. People might say, for example, that medicine, history, the humanities, the social sciences are non-religious part of the curriculum. And then there are other parts of the curriculum that are religious. I think that one of the problems that creates for us is that it buys into the assumption that religion and the rest of what we do are different things. Let me give an example. Consider the study of history. Historians have points of view, just as all of us do. There are Marxist historians who think that history is driven by material forces and follows a dialectical progression towards some utopian end. There are feminist historians who reread history from a feminine point of view. And their aim is to illuminate a neglected female viewpoint and appreciate rediscover underappreciated female actors who've been important in history. In France, in the 20th century, there was the Annales School, Bloch and Brodel and Ariès, and their approach to history was to stress the importance of social rather than political themes and structures rather than events. Well, I think that historians with a religious focus or viewpoint begin with assumptions that are different, but not different in kind from Marxists and feminists and so on. And the same is true of the study of poetry and the arts, politics, sociology, psychology, law, economics. So, for example, at the Catholic University of America, I would hope that the curricula in these disciplines would differ in some ways from what you find at a secular university. Some things would be the same, of course, the statistical methods that you use in sociology or in economics. But our historians at the Catholic University of America have a particular interest in the role of religion and religious ideas and religious institutions in history. To give you just a few examples, the chairman of the department is a man named Jerry Muller, who is Jewish, and his most recent book is called Capitalism and the Jews. One of our young professors, Catherine Jansen, has written about preaching and popular devotion in the late Middle Ages. Leslie Tentler, who is another professor in the department, writes about Catholics and contraception. Philip Rousseau is a famous writer about Basil of Caesarea. So the subjects that are of interest to them are in some ways things that they're led to by their religious beliefs. And I think that their own religious ideas will influence their judgments about the impact and the value of movements and people and practices. Now, it's certainly true that at the Catholic University of America, we have required courses that students should take in philosophy and theology. And these are things that you might naturally classify as religious inquiries. But one of the things that I hope we can get beyond is this classification of studies into religious and not religious, because they actually are much more united.
I would like to ask a question to John Garvey.
Well, your approach, apparently, is that it is not necessary to divide between 25% of Jewish students or not, because historians studying religion, studying Christianity, they're aware of teaching philosophy, history, or the humanities, probably already has a specific approach which is biased. But this may lead to another problem. If you want your university really to be Catholic in this respect, or religious in this respect, it is not necessary for the vast majority of students to be religious. That choosing the professor means choosing a religious one. And then I'll translate into English for Professor Garvey.
But doesn't this create a delicate problem that you would need a critical mass of your professors if you really want the university to have that particular identity you're trying to explore? They would have to be at a minimum religious and probably Christian. because otherwise they wouldn't teach history in this particular way, or philosophy in this particular way, or literature with this particular interest. And wouldn't that create some problem in the choice of professor? Would there be some kind of religious test that one would have to satisfy before being appointed?
That's a very good question. The question is how we build a faculty that has this perspective and set of values and interests and so on. Wouldn't it create a kind of religious test for people to join the faculty? In one sense, the answer is yes. Pope John Paul II wrote an encyclical entitled Ex Corde Ecclesiae, in which he talked about the nature of Catholic universities and what it meant for a university to be Catholic. And in the United States, the American Catholic, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, took about 10 years to draft some norms about the application of Ex Corde Ecclesiae to American Catholic universities. And one of the things that the application of Ex Corde Ecclesiae means, the American Catholic Bishop said, is that a majority of the faculty at a Catholic university should be made up of Catholics committed to the witness of the faith. So let me say two things about this way of looking at the problem. One is that anybody who's familiar with university hiring knows that tests like this already go on in the hiring of faculty. If you have a department that has a Marxist cast to it, the faculty themselves who do hiring will look for people who share their point of view. The same with the history department that's heavily invested in the French Annales school. And I would say that it's actually a good thing from the point of view of consumers of higher education to have different universities that represent different points of view that students can choose from in deciding where to get their education. If we're really serious about building a Catholic intellectual culture, one of the things that's necessary is to have a critical mass of people in the same place, working on the same problems, from the same point of view. I said I wanted to say two things. And the second thing I want to say is that it's also important in building a culture like this that a faculty include points of view that dissent from the prevailing ideology, if you want to call it that. I don't think a Catholic university can be a serious university if it only represents Catholic points of view. Because the danger that you then encounter is that everybody will think alike and nobody will question prevailing orthodoxies. But if you want to build an interesting and Catholic intellectual movement, you need to have a large number of really intelligent Catholics working on the same problem from their own point of view.
Wonderful answer. Thank you, President Garvey. Rector, alla Cattolica lei pensa che bisognerebbe avere una
Do you think that at the Cattolica there should be a majority of students who are practicing Catholics? Yes, I think so. But I need to further explain it, because the first reply by Professor Garvey indicated one of the salient points, and this requires further analysis. Well, please let us not forget that there is the problem of the size of the university, first of all. Therefore, the number of professors and students. This is very relevant, because the whole situation changes according to whether have to select 30 professors or 700 professors. Just because universities, successful universities or trendy universities and Catholic universities, as I said, do not follow the mainstream, but are a very successful model of university, to answer the question, we need to have a percentage of Catholic or Jewish or Muslim students, taking into account the function which is, according to us, the main in a successful university. I think that the major function is not just the conservation of that sense of religion that is at its roots, but rather promoting, enhancing that religious sense or meaning in the light of the function of what a Catholic university can do to solve the problems of the current society. That sense of religion needs to create events, improve society. I think that this is the core of the matter. Well, if we think about sciences or the percentage of religious, bioethic, philosophical, well, in all sciences, all of them, humanities and non-humanities, all sciences according to the old Western conception, all sciences enjoy different statuses, because the surrounding world attributes more social usefulness to the sciences that seemingly produce more immediate results. Therefore, medical studies seem to be more useful than law or philosophy, and in the future, research in dietary sciences will be financed much more than economics or philosophy, because the social usefulness of those sectors is, though wrongly, considered to be higher. We all know, however, that the humanities, law, or philosophy are as important as the sciences that produce an immediate and productive outcome. And therefore, the relationship between religious orientation and the religious orientation of university and the teachings, the courses, the curricula is very important. Alongside sciences, we have theological, social doctrine and other teachings. This is related to the first point, that is, we have all sciences that express a religious sense, and they are affected by it. I'm sorry if it's my answer. My answer is very complicated, but I think that much depends on the researchers and the professors. Hence the selection methodology of professors. In our university, we have we have mechanisms which are similar to those of state universities. But what can be done by universities for the future of the world and of research, especially in the current situation, these constant crises that we are experiencing? Well, our role, our function depends on the mechanism whereby the the mentor chose its mentor, chose its disciple. This is much better than a preordained mechanism of selection of professors. I believe that if our approach is that we need experts, professors who also in the sciences that seem to be far from the humanities, well, they can also convey a sense of religion which can be passed on by the mentor to the disciple. The mentors, the great professor now, can pass on their knowledge, their attitude to their successors. And I will secularize a bit what Garvey said, what Professor Garvey said. I'm a political scientist, and I'm less precise than him there. We need witnesses in faith, to paraphrase him, and we also need leaders, serious experts and researchers, but also leaders, because the religious sense of a university today does not mean that it has to close in on itself, but that it has to open to the surrounding world. Hence, great leader capacity in professors is a very important aspect too, a very salient point. I hope I have answered your question. A question for Professor Kaveh that I will translate myself. Being in a university with a Jewish identity or a Christian identity, well, this is related to what we've just heard. It is not just a question of learning about Thomas More, Thomas Aquinas, and so on and so forth. Jewish identity or a Christian identity is an approach to the world, a behavior, a way to understand the world, not just in the intellectual way, but also in the ethic and moral way. Therefore, the answer cannot be found in the curriculum of the course. So, my question is the following, and please be as short as possible, because I have more questions for you, and time is ticking away. But how do you think you can face this problem? Did you understand the question? Please, if you understood it, ask him not to translate.
I will answer. If you take, let's say, every university in a time scale of 1,000 years, will it prevail in his character? So it's a good question. In physics, my profession, we answer it. Systems that are dynamic are changing totally unless you have something which is called a fixed point. the fixed point of my university to maintain its character is to have experts in any aspect of Judaism, which is in Talmud, in Bible, in Jewish philosophy, you name it. And they come and enter in every subject, whether it's medicine, psychology, an additional dimension. So a student in medicine, which we start now a new faculty, will study, of course, what is the attitude of ethics according to is Jewishness and medicine. What we did in the university, we performed about 50, 60 centers of activities, as you said, because philosophy must end up with a deed. And every student in the university, in one of the nearly 60 departments, is experiencing the wisdom of his field in helping people within the best sense of religion, helping the poor, helping to weak societies, and then you can find someone who calls himself religious and someone who is less religious, practicing the same thing in reality to help people. I strongly believe there is not a separation in life. Separation leads to extremism. And life is continuous. And when someone defines himself religious, there are at least 10 categories of religious Jew. When someone says he's secular, there are at least 20 categories of secular Jews. And the same question I found in my Muslim and Christian students. And therefore, the duty of a university is to provide a platform that everyone will enrich his spirituality, not by forcing him, but letting the student to adopt what is the best. Continuous transition from his education at home in high school to a mature life. Every student in my university must study all the points of view that life provides. Otherwise, it's ignorance. And he has, with that platform of all the views, to add the Jewish view and to try to find his best way in life. So my university in the state of Israel provides the largest laboratory of intersection of life, tradition, and excellence in science, and one not on the expense of the other. Coming to my first question, how do you guarantee that will it continue? We are very pleased that about 40% of my professors were in the and the last generation students, and with the whole spectrum of the society. And if he was suitable as a student, he is suitable as a professor. We don't have a mechanism to select students, to select professors. But the general understanding that we have to dignify every point of view without giving up of my own point of view brings my professors into a very nice dialogue. But of course, I don't want a professor in chemistry or physics to say to the student, I think this is the equation because God told me so. He will be fired. Because there is the objective view of science, and on that you can add your own personal beliefs and the wisdom of the university is that delicate balance not ever to disturb. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor? Can I just add a little question, Professor Garvey? Does being the president of the Catholic University of America pose specific problems of academic freedom that maybe in a secular university would not be faced? For example, in the teaching of religion. So, if you wouldn't mind combining this last question with the previous one to remind you, a Christian university is not only a body of knowledge, but also is a way of life. And is there any role of the university in trying to lead their students to that way of life?
I think it's a wonderful question and one that we need to think of at Catholic universities. I would describe one important difference between a Catholic university and a secular university as the widely shared belief at a Catholic university that there is such a thing as truth not just in scientific matters, but also in matters of theology and other disciplines. On the other hand, it's a mistake from a Christian point of view to think that you've ever arrived at the truth. The truth that Catholics believe in is about their own relationship with Christ, not about a set of propositions that they must hold to. I set to one side for a moment propositions like the creed that all Christians believe in. But for this very reason, I think it's integral or essential to the notion of a Catholic university that it respect norms of academic freedom, because it's both presumptuous and, from a Christian point of view, mistaken to think that you have ever arrived at the truth and have a full description of it. This is an important point to emphasize because people who are outside the community of Catholic higher education may suppose that its job is to instruct students in a catechism, a set of propositions that they need to memorize, when in fact the questions they ask, the answers that they give, feel very much like the academic life at secular or private non-Christian universities. But it's informed by the faith and the belief and the hope that there is a truth that we will all eventually come to see.
Thank you. It's always so enriching to exchange views. Unfortunately, time flies. But before leaving, I'd like to give the floor to the Dean, the Italian Dean, and specifically on this question. So a Catholic university, a Christian university, is not just about knowledge, but it's also a way of life. So what's the role that university can play in educating students to this way of life? So, Dean, I give the last word to you. Well, I hope I won't get fired after going back. So I hope it's not going to be my absolute last word in absolute terms. I'm just kidding, of course. But certainly, this is a very complex question. So I would like to be extremely honest and frank and share with you my point of view. I always try to tell my students that they are living an experience that is going to be unique, because the experience of college and university is unique, because then people grow up and then enter the job market, and so that phase of life just ends up. So I try to make them think about all this. And I try also then to think about this issue in relation to the religious sense of our university. And I must say that we're going through very difficult times, but also extremely exciting times, especially if we're going to be able to go beyond sort of all the mainstream ideas on universities dating back to the 19th and 20th century. We will need to go back to universities producing ideas, producing sort of a new wave of ideas. So it's about universities keeping societies together, say, seeing the role of universities as a very important one, because from universities the state gets born and all the main thinkers of the Western world came out of universities. So universities have always played a very important role in sort of in this sense. So let's see how universities can evolve with respect to these enormous challenge for the future. And I think that a conservative-oriented answer would not be enough, would be limiting. What do I mean by that? Since the end of the 19th century on, universities have focused on research, on teaching professional skills to their students, but there is more than that. There is more to that. There is education, which is much broader as a concept. So how should we try to educate these young people? The world we live in is a patchwork of different things. We have political aspects, social aspects, spiritual aspects, but if we make distinctions, that doesn't mean that we do separate. So making distinctions doesn't necessarily lead to separation. So we should try to make our students understand that they should see things as a patchwork, a unique, unified patchwork, but made of different things, because our societies are made up of different things. So I think that education is about educating people to living. And specifically, we should educate people to live within a community that during the college years is the university community. And to do so, people need to make efforts, because it takes effort to live within a community. And the Pope talks about relativism all the time. This seems to be one of the biggest problems of our times. So it's a so-called polytheism of values, because if we say that all values are equal, then consistency seems to be impossible. I can put all this together. How can I sort of put together all the different sort of standards and requirements of scientific sectors? So this polytheism of values can sort of give people a certain kind of tranquility, but then I do not make a real progress. So this is the kind of conservative-oriented approach I'm talking about, and the approach we should try to avoid. I mean, for instance, the founder of the Catholic University of Milan used to say that we should always try to understand the very heart of reality, to understand it, then to try to change it and modify it. But to do so, you need to be consistent. And being consistent is very hard, because then otherwise you risk to say one thing but then to act differently. And the history of the Western world has been characterized by many gods, so to speak, that have tried to keep things going, but in a very precarious way. And today, we're experiencing the result of this kind of approach. Thank you very much, Dean. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of this meeting. I'd like to thank Lorenzo Ornaghi, John Garvey, and Moshe Kaveh. Thank you very much indeed.